Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Mother's Day. Mother's Day is a Polish action drama that tells the story of Nina, a former special operations agent who lives a meager existence watching over her son Max while feigning death from those who hunt for her. At a certain point though, she's alerted to the sudden disappearance of Max, who appears to have been kidnapped. Nina dusts herself off and throws herself into an intense search and rescue mission where she enlists the help of those once close to her so that she can find her son. In doing so, she raises the attention of the gangsters who want her dead, forcing her to fight her way for a second chance to be with her son as she tries to save him. This movie started off decently at the beginning, but became increasingly more obtuse the longer it went on. I still enjoyed how entertaining it was as an action flick with dark themes behind it, but its confusing story and tone frequently put me at odds with it. Nina was okay as a main character, although a bit uninspired in approach. Due to circumstances related to her past, she's forced to stay distant from her son, and to an extent it was interesting to see how she coped with the devastation regarding her forced loss of motherhood. There's not much else to her character other than this though. She suffers the same dour life as many other characters in her position, being an alcoholic and suffering from depression. So while I did sympathize with her plight a little bit, the lack of originality behind her design dampened my excitement by a large margin. The mother-son relationship is also lacking in depth as well. It makes some sense that Max would have animosity toward her as he grew up without knowing who she was, so when they first meet, their dynamic actually helps in shaking up the events of the story. Once things get going though, it goes back to being ordinary. Because the two never kick things off together until about the second half of the movie, they feel generic due to a lack of proper build-up. It's not until later in the movie that their past and reason for separating is slowly unveiled, and I can understand the suspense in this regard, but it takes too long to bother getting invested in them. The story in general feels like it should be a lot more simple in scope than it ended up being. If it had just been Nina locating Max and going on the run from the gang that wants to hunt her down, it would have been fine, and for a while, at least in the first act anyway, it does move relatively well in this direction. The striking dark visuals and tone was the first thing I noticed about this movie, with how well framed characters were in light and shadows, how neon colors blended with the background, and just how gritty the movie's world felt. The aesthetics are further bolstered by a variety of locations and sinister ambient music that create a feeling of unease when watching it. Combined with the seriousness involved in Nina's mission, everything about how the movie looks and sounds feels right for the story it's trying to tell, at least until later on. Then it starts getting into the whole crime syndicate angle where these gangsters are trying to track down and kill Nina once she's made her presence known again. It's a good idea, but what ruins it for me is just how silly the villains are. The story gets increasingly more goofy as it progresses, as it introduces these eccentric tattooed whack jobs with weird gimmicks and names like Voltmeter for example, who takes down bad guys using tasers and also for some reason goes around wearing some kind of thong where his ass is clearly visible. This results in tonal clashes between the dark gritty realism it established earlier and the ridiculous silly stuff it throws in later. I wouldn't mind so much if it stuck with one or the other, but with how much the movie flip-flops between tones, it makes it hard to become fully immersed in it. The only time this change in tone pays off is during the action scenes, which admittedly were a lot of fun to watch. The brawls are packed with visual flair, with one of my favorite things being water particles flying when wet characters are smacked around, and the movie is just violent enough to add tension to the story without being over the top. These action scenes are all extremely well shot as well, which seems to be a rarity in American cinema by comparison. It's always easy to tell what's happening on screen, as the camera pans back and forth and gives enough space between it and the characters to get drawn in. It even makes creative use of long takes that add further tension. It's a shame that the movie slows down so much outside these action scenes. When it isn't featuring life or death situations, there's so much waffling about regarding the crime syndicate's background, the human trafficking they're involved in, how much history they have with Nina, the connections they have, and it's all just so boring. There's nothing wrong with having a little bit of detail to explain things, as it helps make the story more concise and adds context to character actions, but at a certain point, it becomes a bit much to see the movie attempt to weave so many plot threads, especially with how little it takes itself seriously at times. The plot in general isn't much different from other movies like it, which on one hand makes it easier to understand in spite of the attempted complex narrative, but it's also disappointing to see how familiar it feels in structure. It resembles so many escort mission movies out there, it's not worth talking about much at length. That doesn't necessarily mean it does its job badly. It is competent in telling a basic story about how far a mother will go to protect the ones they love, but only at that basic level. It tries too hard to be something more, and as a result, it becomes lost as to what kind of story it wants to tell. Overall, Mother's Day is an okay but forgettable action flick that is similar to most other action flicks of its plot structure. If you like action dramas that have dark themes and can tolerate dealing with tonal shifts, you might enjoy checking this out. I can appreciate the ambition behind what it sets out to accomplish, and the action scenes will satisfy anyone with a craving for them, but it became too silly and overcomplicated for my tastes, and at the end of the day, it isn't anything new. It's pretty much as expected and predictable as the holiday it's named after. What did you think about this movie? Did you enjoy the action scenes and how dark the movie was, or were you also put off by its more sillier moments? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of Mother's Day. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the German action adventure, Blood and Gold. Bye bye!